Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make your own custom temperature tower G-code. The first thing that you need to do is to go over to Thingiverse or any website that you like to find a temperature tower model. There's many different options to choose from. There's one where it's just one piece and already pre-stacked, or the one that I'll be using today is this kind where it comes in sections. So I'm just going to get rid of this large one, just using the delete key. And the first thing that we need to do is figure out some basic heights so that way when we stack it, it's simple to do. So the first thing that we really need to figure out is what are the individual heights of each of these pieces. Right now, I can see that the maximum height on my build plate for the models is 10 millimeters, and that lines up to each of these individual temperature pieces. Some temperature tower models have a base that you can use that will give you a little bit of a larger surface area when you print, just so that way the temperature tower remains stable as it prints higher and higher. In order to find the height of this base while I have everything else loaded in is a little bit simpler than you might think. All I'm going to do is Control A to select everything, Shift click on the base so it's deselected, and I'm going to hit Delete to remove everything else. And pretty much instantaneously you can see right down here in this bottom left corner my maximum Z changed from 10 millimeters to 1.4. So that means all of my stacking for the individual temperature pieces will eventually need to be offset by 1.4 millimeters. So in order to bring back all of those pieces, I'm going to do a Control Z. And just to show you the basic general temperature range that I'll be running from is right here in my downloads for the Ender 5 Plus. It's all separated. And for most PLAs, you'll want to run a temperature tower from just around 180 to about 220. And if you have different materials, I just recommend looking at the spool and seeing what the manufacturer suggests their temperature or their print or their filament to be printed at. And that's what I would plug in. Today I'll be going from 170 to 215, and that's what I have loaded in already. So let's get down to business and start stacking these individual pieces. It's really simple. I'm just going to find the highest temperature first. You generally want to print from your highest temperature to your lowest temperature, and I'm going to make this at the center of my build plate. So I'm just typing in 0 space 0 with a tab in there, so that way it gets to the exact middle. Right now it doesn't look like that's in the best position, so I'm just going to move this out of the way, so that way this is my middle. 0, if I can type 0, 0. And there we go. For the next piece, I just look around at all of these temperatures because I'm starting with my 215. 210 is the next. I'll just do 0, 0, and each of these pieces are 10 millimeters high, so I just type 10. And there we can see it, it's stacked nicely. And we're just going to keep doing the same process through this until all of these are stacked on top of each other. If you're doing a rather large temperature tower where you're testing a lot of temperatures, this can take a minute or two until it's completely stacked. But as I said, I'm just going to keep plugging and chugging through here until I have all these stacked. Here we are with the entire stack ready to go. Now what we need to do is remember how this base was 1.4 millimeters tall. It's not really telling us anything right now, as we can see that the maximum height of our STL inside of the print volume is at 100 millimeters. So if you forget, feel free just to highlight all of these, delete them, and view what this value is again, and just Control Z to bring everything back. So now that I know everything needs to be shifted up by 1.4 millimeters, I can just come right here, type in 1.4, and that has now offset this entire tower by just enough, so that way if I move this in, it is perfectly stacked. For most of you, that shouldn't have been too difficult. The fun part is getting the G-code to change temperature. Right now, my material is set up to print at 190. We'll make it start off at 200 just for good measure to see what happens. So we slice, and as far as the G-code is concerned, our nozzle heats up right at the beginning of the print and stays at 200 degrees all the way through. Here's how we're going to change it. So at this height in the print, it changes to 215 degrees. Then after another 10 millimeters, it becomes 210 and just keeps dropping the further higher it gets throughout the temperature tower. So in order to get this temperature tower to change temperature, we come up to Extensions, Post-Processing, Modify G-code. And here we get a little pop-up window, and we're going to hit Add a Script. We can see that this is a pretty long list of different options that Cura has built-in features to do. There are more that you can get from the marketplace, which you can access online. But what we're going to be using is Change at Z 5.1.1 Experimental. It always has worked for me, but here's how to do it. So looking at these settings, we see this trigger. This can be So this change at Z is nice because it lets you define an actual height that the printer will reach, and then it changes something, or you can go by layer number. I've used both, they both work, and for this one, since I happen to know the various heights memorized, I have those heights memorized, we'll keep it on height. And in order to get my print to change from the original 200 degrees C, where it's beginning the print at 215, I'm going to have it change right at the top of this base and as it starts printing this individual piece right here. And that happens at 1.4 millimeters. And we want the behavior to keep the value instead of only applying it for a single layer. Now what we do is we come down to our change extruder 1 temperature. If your machine only has one extruder, this is the option that you'll use for the entire time. And we just change this value to 215. And we hit close. We can see here that modifying that G-code will make us reslice, and that's good because that means when this file is saved, our print will begin at 200 C, then once it hits right here, let me pop over to the preview layer. So it begins at 200 C, and once we hit this layer, the nozzle temperature will increase to 215. And in order to make it do the same thing for the rest of these, we just add on another script. And that's what we do. Alright, I have set up this entire temperature tower. You can see that I used some interesting values. How I got the 91.4, the 81.4 is from the base. We know from earlier that each of these, oh well, it won't let me change to prepare view right now. But we know from each of these little pieces for our different temperatures were 10 millimeters tall. And we know the base was 1.4 millimeters tall. And it's just the same thing where right at 1.4 millimeters, I want to increase the nozzle temperature to 215 degrees C. After 10 millimeters, once it gets through this piece, I want it to decrease by 5 temperatures. So that's where the second script comes in at 11.4 millimeters to change the nozzle temperature to 210. And it does it all the way down, or in this case, all the way up the temperature tower. Let's go ahead, and this automatically saves, so I'll hit close, slice, and on Cura 4.6, I think this feature was introduced in Cura 4.5, but I could be wrong. This pop-up appears to let you know that there are modifications to the G-code. This is really nice because Cura does not lose these even if you close the program. If you come back after a week or two of not printing and you slice your new file, These scripts are still here, and they will do some weird things to your print, and you'll be scratching your head wondering why in 3 weeks your prints are changing temperatures as it's running through whatever you're printing. So now that we have Cura all set up, let's go ahead, save to file, move the G-code over to the printer, and print. As we can see, the temperature tower has finished printing, and it's done some pretty unique things, and something that should only be unique to a temperature tower. We can see that it started off right here at 215 degrees and ended up here at 170, with some fairly expected results. 170 is a fairly cool printing temperature, and you can see that basically as soon as the temperature dropped down to 170, it started to clog. And that's where you got these under extrusions and the print ended up failing. At this point, one of the hardest things that takes time to learn is what to look for on these temperature towers. The first thing that I look for in selecting my new temperature is, let's just get that stringing out of the way, is the stringing. You can see right here at 215 inside that we have strings just going around, and there's even some going underneath the bridge. So 215 definitely isn't the option. So I'm going to look for the option that has the least amount of stringing, and that is just about 185 or 190 or 195. So that's nice because it narrows it down. The next thing that I do is I look at the bottom of the bridging and I see just how level is that. Is it drooping a lot on one of those three temperatures? Is it drooping the same? Because a lot of these bridging and stringing issues can be resolved by printing at a different speed, or using a different part cooler fan, or a different shroud. There's a lot of different options, but we're just going to go for the one that looks the cleanest. And honestly, all three of these look fairly similar. 195 might have the advantage, but now what we do is we look at this third part. We're going to look at the overhangs. And that's where the 190 looks the best to me. On every single one of these, I'm not sure how you can see it on the video, but there's 3 different angles on this overhang. And this most significant angle is where every single one fails, but at the 190 mark, the second, or this middle angle, looks the best to me. So I'm going to print at 190 degrees with my Arione marble. That should wrap up everything that we need to know about how to make a temperature tower, to read it, and to use it for the best success. Good luck, and enjoy your 3D printing.